Hello and welcome to the last film in the Lino with Laura 2 series on multi-block printing. For this film I just want to answer a few questions and look at some of the papers that we've used. So I have been busy and I have been printing up, and I'm going to show you both the Bucks designs on different papers so that you can see the final results, and I also want to show you the blocks and have a little chat about multi-block versus reduction printing. So if we start with the Bucks, the graphic version of Bucks with the frame, you can see here I've got a variety of papers. So I was, for this experiment, using the Origami tester pack, which comes with the 10 editioning papers, and I've got a few of them here. And I've written the names down and the weight of the paper as well for your reference and for mine. And I've also printed on my printing press a version on my usual printing paper for Lino, which is Fabriano Rosa Spina, and that's 285 gram paper. So that's a much heavier paper, and that was done on the printing press. So I wanted you to compare results with that, because part of this project was all about hand printing, because I know a lot of people aren't as lucky as me and don't have the space or the printing press and hand print everything. So as I said at the beginning of the project, washi paper is really a good choice for hand printing if you work with lots of layers like I do, because of its sturdiness and its absorbency. So I had a quick count up, and I think there are 7 layers in all to this print, allowing for sort of going back and forth the way that I do. So all of these here have been printed with the same mix of inks. So looking across the papers, you can see how the different papers have affected the appearance of the print quite a lot, as you would expect. I don't normally go with coloured paper. I always print on a white paper. That's my preference. If I was going to go with a coloured paper, it would be a natural coloured paper, not a sort of specifically coloured paper, if you see what I mean. So looking at these, I think for this bright daytime image, I probably like the whiter papers. These two up here are quite nice. This is the Hakuho Select, which is quite a heavy paper. That's 220 grams, and that's given a nice brightness to the print. And this one over here, the Okawara, and I apologise for my pronunciation, which is probably not ideal, slightly warmer feel to it. That's only 51 grams. So the other thing I would say about papers like this, if you are framing or mounting to sell work and you have used a lighter weight paper, always back it with white. I mean, you probably know that, I'm sure you know that, but if you've watched our framing video, you'll see that that's something that Ben always does when he's framing. So if I come on to these ones in the foreground here, the Kozo Natural. Now that one it's a beautiful paper, but it has like little natural bits of fibre in there, which I think would work really well for something that was a bit more organic, maybe the Scottish print that I did, where it's a rougher landscape. I think in the context of this quite controlled graphic image, I wouldn't want such a sort of, I don't know what the word is for it, but maybe a paper with little flecks in it. The green I don't think works for this print because I think it dulls the clouds down, but we'll look at it with the evening version where it's very, very different result. And the again with the Kitakata Select, it's interesting and it has a kind of nice vintage feel to it. And the Shiramini, this Shiramini Select, this is what I'm going to Shiramine is the one that I use for my Japanese woodblock prints, and I'm going to be working with that in my Japanese woodblock film. But what you can see in common with all of these is how beautifully it's taking the ink and how well these have stood up to the repeated layers. So even this Kitakata is only 36 grams and it stood up really well. So washi, great for hand printing, and that's the result across the more graphic image. And now I'm going to swap things around and look at the evening image and where the different papers work better for that. Here I've got the evening version of the Bucks landscape, so you can see same landscape, looser cutting, and also very different way of printing. The previous one, the graphic one, all the inks were opaque. In this print, all of the inks are extended so that I'm allowing the paper to sort of shine through the transparent ink. And that's where these more coloured papers really come into play. So if you are hand printing with extender, getting an even flat sheet of extender is quite a tricky business, and you don't want the paper to fight you. So even if you don't use a washi paper, try and go for something that has a bit of absorbency, so that when you put your sheet of extended ink across the block and you take your print by hand, there's a good chance of getting a nice even layer. So here you can see, again, on the printing press, I've printed my Fabriano Rosa Spina 285 gram print, as I would normally do. And here on the washi, you can see the hand-printed versions of them. And there's something rather lovely about these papers in the front. The Bamboo Select of them is the whitest, I guess. That's 170 gram. That Bamboo Select, I use that sometimes for Japanese woodblock printing. It's a nice paper. It's quite blankety. It's quite soft and thick, and it's nice if you like a kind of emboss feel with it. But these are really lovely, and I particularly like the Bunkoshi Select. That has a kind of warmth to it. It has a glow to it, which really suits this evening scene. And with the white paper behind it, there's a kind of glow to the sky. So if you're thinking about different papers for your prints, have a think about what kind of vibe you want, because often just using a different paper can really change that feel. So that's the evening version. At this point, I should say that I am going to be selling versions of all 4 of these designs on my website. They are going to be on the Fabriano Rosa Spina paper, and they are going to be printed on the press because I haven't got the energy to print them all by hand, but they are going to be available for sale as part of the Artist Support Pledge. The idea of the pledge is for artists to support themselves during the COVID crisis and also to support their fellow artists in the community. The way it works is that I will be selling these at £35 each. When I have sold enough to have come to the total of £1,000, I will then spend £200 buying a piece of art from another artist, and so the pledge goes on and we spread the love. So if you would like one of the prints from this series of films, you just need to go to my website shop and you'll be able to order it. So, advert over, and now I just want to do a roundup of the blocks and look at the whole multi-block process. Here are the Scottish prints. I haven't had as much time to work on them as the Bucks ones, so the ones that I'm going to print for the Artist Support Pledge will probably look different from these. So, but these ones are both printed on Hosho paper. This is the Hosho Select from Awagami, and this is Hosho. Now, I don't have a name for it, but it comes from this Hosho pad of paper. So this one I think is, let me see, 80 grams. And that one I'd say is a touch heavier. I think that's about 90 grams maybe. So you can see the two versions very different from each other. So that brings me on to the blocks, and when I first started planning this, I was going to work with two completely different sets of blocks. Let me just lay them out. And the first picture, if I get all these the right way round to me, was basically made up of three blocks. The underlay, the mid tones, and then a line block at the end. And then I was going to cut a completely separate set of blocks for another print of this view. But rather than do that, I decided I would do an adaptation, and I would just add in a block using an offset method of registration, which I showed in the films. So those three blocks became four blocks, and I added another block to change the print entirely. So if you're working with multi-block printing, do bear in mind that's something you can do. You can throw in another block, change things round, and really mix things up. So don't always feel like everything is cut and dried. If nothing else, hopefully this series has shown you just how you can make changes on the hoof as the pictures develop. So working with multi-block has been a really interesting journey. I have to say, when we were thinking about how to do a second series about lino cut, and I came up with the idea of multi-block, it's not a way that I normally work. I normally always work with reduction printing, where I'm using the same piece of lino and I'm cutting away. If you watch my first film, from the first series of Lino with Laura, you'll have seen me making a reduction print like that. And my natural way of behaving is to respond as I go along, and I don't have a massive plan. But what I discovered with these various blocks was that you can be very flexible with multi-block as well. With these, I was working on a fairly small scale, and I changed things around a lot. So with the evening view that I was working with, let's bump those up so you can actually see them. With the evening view I was working with, I wasn't even going to do an evening view, let alone a very transparent, extended print. And that's just something I decided halfway through, and I made some alterations. And instead of using a complete, this was going to be a shadow block, I started using part of it for the underlay of my clouds. So again, a lot of flexibility in the way I've developed these multi-blocks. So don't feel that a multi-block print has to be something that's completely cut and dried and planned from the beginning. It is something that you can manipulate and you can change, and you can add blocks in and out. Now, somebody asked me if I preferred one method or the other. And the answer is that with lino cut, the way that I work, I would probably always err towards reduction printing. But Japanese woodblock, which is another process that I use, is a multi-block process. So I do have that multi-block process as well. And in the next series of films, I'm going to take you through the process of me making a Japanese woodblock print as a multi-block process. So I do have the two ways of working in my everyday studio life. I can't say that doing this would persuade me to do a large multi-block print, but it's certainly given me food for thought for smaller prints. And in the future, I might well start doing a few smaller multi-block prints. I particularly like the idea of being able to maybe do a series of prints that are very loose and painterly and allow me to change colours and be more playful. Here are my final 4 designs. Tonight, Friday the 17th of July at 8 p.m, I am going to be on YouTube live streaming to chat about this project, and by the magic of timing, I will have the final copies of the two Scottish prints sorted, so I'll have the final versions of all 4 prints to talk about on live stream. So if you want to join me to have a chat and ask some questions, please do. If you would like to be the owner of any of these prints, and remember I'll have those final versions done by then go to my website and you can check out all 4 designs on there as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I hope you're going to join me for my new Japanese woodblock series. We're going to have a break of a couple of weeks just to set things up, but we will keep you posted, and then you'll be able to join me and learn about the Japanese woodblock process. Thank you very much for following me, and I will catch you later.